People think the greatest love stories belong to the young. They're wrong. The deepest love is often the one that survives decades of silence. The kind that never truly leaves your heart. The kind that waits, even when you stop believing it ever will. I was 68 years old when it happened. It was a cold October afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina. The sky had been gray since sunrise. Rain tapped softly against my windshield as I sat in the parking lot outside a small grocery store, debating whether I really needed another loaf of bread. Since Martha passed away 4 years earlier, grocery shopping had become strangely quiet. No shopping lists, no playful arguments over which coffee to buy. No one asking me to grab flowers on the way out. Just me. I finally stepped outside, opened my umbrella, and hurried toward the entrance. Inside, the store buzzed with ordinary life. Young parents chasing toddlers, teenagers laughing near the frozen food aisle, an elderly couple holding hands while comparing apples. I smiled. Life kept moving, even when ours seemed to slow down. After paying for my groceries, I pushed my cart outside. The rain had become heavier. Wind swept across the parking lot. That was when I noticed her. She stood beneath the small awning near the entrance. No umbrella. A navy blue coat, silver hair resting gently on her shoulders. She hugged a paper grocery bag close to her chest, waiting for the rain to ease. There was something familiar about the way she stood, one foot slightly turned inward. The same posture, the same quiet patience. My heart did something it hadn't done in decades. It stumbled. No, I whispered to myself. It can't be. She slowly turned. Our eyes met. Time disappeared. The rain, the traffic, the people walking between us, everything faded. Those bright blue eyes, older now, surrounded by gentle wrinkles, but unmistakable. Evelyn? The word escaped before I even realized I'd spoken. She stared at me. For several seconds, she didn't move. Then I watched her lips tremble. Thomas? No one had called me Thomas in nearly 50 years. To everyone else, I was Tom. To my late wife, Tom. To my children, Dad. To my grandchildren, Grandpa. Only one person in the world had ever looked at me and softly said, Thomas. My knees suddenly felt weak. She covered her mouth. Oh my goodness. Neither of us moved. We simply stood there in the rain, two strangers to everyone else. But to each other, we were 17 again. I walked toward her, slowly, almost afraid that if I hurried, she might disappear. When I finally stood beside her, neither of us knew what to say. After 47 years, where do you even begin? You haven't changed, I said. She laughed through tears. Oh, Thomas, now you're lying. No, I smiled. Your hair is different. Your face has more stories. But your smile, I would know it anywhere. She looked away for a moment. I can't believe this. Neither can I. The rain continued falling around us. Cars came and went. People hurried past. No one knew that two hearts were quietly finding each other again after almost half a century. Finally, I held out my umbrella. Would you like to stay dry? She smiled. Only if we share it. So we did. We walked together across the parking lot beneath one umbrella, exactly the way we used to walk home from high school, 47 years ago. Neither of us realized it then, but that rainy afternoon was about to change the rest of our lives forever. We reached my truck, but neither of us made a move to leave. The rain drummed softly against the roof. Evelyn looked across the parking lot and smiled. "Do you remember?" she asked. "Remember what?" She pointed toward the rain. "You always loved rainy days." I laughed. "I still do." "No," she said gently. "You loved them because you said rain made the whole world slow down, and people finally had time to notice each other." I stared at her. "I actually said that?" "You were 17, she replied with a grin. "You said a lot of dramatic things." We both laughed. For the first time in years, my laughter didn't feel forced. It came from somewhere I thought had disappeared forever. Across the street stood a small cafe with warm lights glowing through its windows. The same cafe had been there for years, though under different owners. I nodded toward it. "Coffee?" She hesitated, for only a second. "I'd like that." The little bell above the cafe door chimed as we stepped inside. Fresh coffee filled the room. Someone was quietly playing Frank Sinatra through old speakers. The place felt frozen in another time. We chose a table beside the window. Outside, the rain continued to fall, blurring the streets into soft shades of gray. For a while, neither of us spoke. We simply looked at one another, trying to recognize the young faces hidden inside the older ones. Finally, Evelyn smiled. "I always wondered what happened to you." "So did I. I looked for you." My heart skipped. "You did?" She nodded. "When we moved to Ohio, I wrote you 3 letters. I frowned. I never received a single one. Her smile faded. "I figured your parents didn't like me." "My parents? They never approved of us." I slowly shook my head. "They never even told me." Silence settled between us. 47 years built on one misunderstanding. "I wrote 2, I whispered. "You did?" 5 letters. She blinked. "I never got those either." We stared at one another. Neither of us needed to ask what had happened. Back then, there were no cell phones, no social media, no email. Sometimes a single lost letter was enough to erase 2 people from each other's lives. Evelyn looked out the window. "I waited every day after school." "For what?" "The mail." She smiled sadly. "I believed you'd write." "I did. I know that now." A tear rolled slowly down her cheek. So much time. I reached across the table, carefully, not wanting to presume anything. She looked at my hand, then gently placed hers in mine. Her fingers were cooler than I remembered, but somehow they still fit perfectly. "Tell me about your life," she said softly. I took a deep breath. "I married." She nodded. "I know." "You knew?" "My cousin still lived in Asheville," she smiled gently. "She mailed me your wedding announcement." I lowered my eyes. "I'm sorry." She squeezed my hand. "Don't be. I loved Martha." "I can see that. She was a wonderful woman." "I believe she was." I smiled. "We were married 40 years. "That's beautiful." It was. The words caught in my throat. I lost her to pancreatic cancer. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Thomas." I swallowed. "I still talk to her sometimes." She nodded. "So do I." I looked up. "You?" "My husband." There was a long silence. He passed away 6 years ago. I'm sorry. He was kind. She smiled softly. He knew there had been someone before him. My heart tightened. He wasn't jealous. No, she laughed quietly. He used to tease me. What did he say? She smiled through her tears. He'd say, "If that boy from North Carolina ever comes back, I suppose I'll have some competition." I couldn't help laughing. He sounds like a good man. He really was. We sat there honoring two people we had deeply loved. There was no guilt, no regret, only gratitude. Because loving again doesn't erase the love that came before. It simply reminds us that the heart is far larger than we ever imagined. After a while, Evelyn reached into her purse. I've carried something for almost 50 years. She unfolded a small, worn photograph. The edges were faded, the colors nearly gone. I stared at it in disbelief. It was us, 17 years old, standing beside the old oak tree behind Lincoln High School. She wore a yellow dress. I had my football jacket draped over one shoulder. Both of us were laughing at something neither of us could remember. "You kept this?" She smiled. Every time I moved, it came with me. I could barely speak. I thought I was the only one. Slowly, I opened my wallet. Hidden behind my driver's license was another faded photograph. Her senior portrait. The corners had softened from decades of being carried everywhere. Evelyn gasped. "You still have it." I never stopped. For a long moment, neither of us said another word. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, two old photographs quietly proved something neither time nor distance had managed to destroy. Our first love had never truly disappeared. It had simply been waiting. When the waitress came to refill our coffee, she smiled at us. "You two look like you've known each other forever." Evelyn and I looked at one another. Then we laughed. "In a way," Evelyn said softly, "we have." The waitress smiled and walked away, leaving us alone again. Outside, the rain had become gentler. Neither of us seemed interested in leaving. For 47 years, life had kept us apart. Now, every minute felt precious. "Do you remember the oak tree behind the football field?" I asked. Evelyn's eyes lit up. "The one where you carved our initials?" I laughed. "I got detention for that. You deserved it." She smiled the way she used to when she teased me. "I was trying to impress you." "You already had." Those 4 words settled quietly between us. I felt 17 again, not because my body was younger, but because my heart was. "Thomas, there was something I never told you." I leaned closer. "What is it?" "The day we left Asheville, my father didn't tell me until that morning. He'd accepted a new job in Ohio months before. I begged him not to go. I cried all night. I even packed my suitcase and told my mother I was staying. A tear rolled down her cheek. She held me and said, 'Sometimes life decides for us.' I hated those words. So did I. She smiled sadly. "I thought you'd come after me." I looked down. I wanted to. "I drove my father's truck to your house." "You did?" "The day after graduation."
Please give it a like, subscribe. Her eyes widened.
"What happened?"
The house was empty.
"I asked your neighbor where you'd gone."
He said your family had moved.
"No address?"
No phone number.
"Nothing." She covered her mouth. "Oh, Thomas." I sat in my truck for almost an hour. I kept thinking, she'll come back. But you never did. I couldn't. I was already hundreds of miles away. For a while, neither of us spoke. Some wounds don't bleed. They simply stay quiet for decades, until one rainy afternoon opens them again. Finally, Evelyn whispered, "Do you know what hurt the most?" "What?" "I thought you'd forgotten me." I looked directly into her eyes. There wasn't a single birthday I didn't remember. She froze. "What?" "Every June 22nd. I wondered where you were, if you were happy, if someone loved you the way I hoped they would." Her tears flowed freely now. I did the same. "Every October 9th, your birthday, I would bake a small chocolate cake. Even after I married." I blinked in surprise. "You baked me a birthday cake?" She laughed through tears. "My husband always knew why." "What did he say?" "He'd smile and steal the first slice. He'd say, 'Some people never really leave our hearts.'" I smiled. "He must have loved you very much." "He did." "And Martha loved you." "She did." We sat there quietly. Neither of us was trying to replace the people we'd lost. Love isn't a competition. It isn't measured by who came first or who came last. Some hearts simply have room for more than one beautiful story. After another cup of coffee, Evelyn looked toward the window. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" "Of course." "When I was 25, I came back to Asheville." My heart stopped. "You did?" "I spent 3 days here. I drove past your parents' house. They told me you'd moved to Charlotte. They said you had a wife. They seemed happy for you." I nodded slowly. "They probably were." I sat across the street for almost an hour, just hoping I'd see you. You were so close. So were you. I was working 12-hour shifts at the furniture factory. If I'd taken that day off... I stopped speaking. Neither of us needed to finish the sentence. Life is full of tiny moments that decide everything. The cafe had grown quieter. Most of the customers had gone home. The owner switched on a small lamp near the fireplace. Its warm light reflected across Evelyn's face. She looked peaceful. More peaceful than when we'd first met in the rain. She smiled at me. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "I don't feel like we're strangers catching up. It feels like we simply paused a conversation and continued it 47 years later." I laughed softly. I was thinking exactly the same thing. She reached across the table. This time she didn't hesitate. She gently held my hand. "Thomas, I don't know how much time either of us has left. We're not young anymore." "No. But whatever time I have, I don't want to spend it wondering, what would have happened if we'd met again?" I looked at her hand resting in mine, then into those familiar blue eyes, eyes that had once belonged to the girl who danced with me at senior prom, eyes that now belonged to a woman who had lived a lifetime of joy, heartbreak, sacrifice, and grace. Without thinking, I turned my hand over and held hers a little tighter. I don't want to wonder anymore either. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. For the first time that afternoon, sunlight broke through the clouds. A single golden beam stretched across the wet pavement. Evelyn smiled. "Looks like the storm is over." I smiled back. Maybe. Or maybe it was only here to bring us back together. Neither of us knew it then, but the greatest surprise of our lives was still waiting for us, because the following morning, someone would knock on my front door, holding a small wooden box that had been hidden for nearly half a century. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. For the first time in years, I had something to look forward to. I found myself smiling while making coffee. Even the silence in the house felt different. Not lonely, hopeful. Rainwater still clung to the maple trees outside my kitchen window, sparkling in the morning sun. I looked at my watch. 9:12 a.m. Evelyn and I had agreed to meet for lunch at noon. 3 hours suddenly felt like an eternity. I laughed at myself. "You're 68 years old, Thomas," I muttered. "You've waited 47 years. You can wait 3 hours." Just then, someone knocked on my front door. 3 slow, gentle knocks. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Evelyn stood there. She wore a cream-colored sweater and blue jeans, her silver hair catching the morning light. But it wasn't her smile that caught my attention. It was the small wooden box she held carefully in both hands. Dark oak, worn smooth with age. Brass hinges dulled by time. She looked unusually nervous. "Good morning," I said. She smiled. "I know we said noon. You couldn't wait either?" She laughed. "I guess not." Then her expression softened. "I found something last night." She lifted the box slightly. "I think it belongs to both of us." We sat in my living room. Sunlight poured through the windows. The wooden box rested on the coffee table between us. Neither of us reached for it immediately. It almost felt sacred. Finally, Evelyn took a deep breath. "My mother gave me this before she died. She told me not to open it until I was ready. I wasn't, so I put it away. For 20 years. What changed?" She looked at me. "You." Slowly, she opened the lid. Inside were dozens of old envelopes, some yellow with age, others tied together with faded blue ribbon. My heartbeat quickened. Letters. So many letters. Evelyn carefully picked one up. The handwriting looked painfully familiar. My own. I stared at it in disbelief. "No." She nodded. "These are yours." My hands trembled as I accepted the first envelope. Across the front, in faded blue ink, were the words, "Miss Evelyn Harper." My 17-year-old handwriting. My breath caught. "I wrote this?" "You did. But I thought you never received them." "I didn't." She looked down. "My father did." Silence filled the room. "My father?" She nodded slowly. "He admitted it before he passed away. He intercepted every letter. He believed we'd ruin each other's futures. He wanted me to marry someone with money. So he hid them." I couldn't speak. 47 years. 47 years. Because of a decision made by someone else. Tears blurred my vision. "There are 5 of them." I wrote 5. "I know. I've read every one. I probably shouldn't have. But after my father confessed, I needed to know what you had written." She carefully unfolded the first letter. I memorized one sentence. She looked into my eyes, then quietly read aloud. "If I have to wait until I'm an old man to see you again, I'll still believe you're worth waiting for." I closed my eyes. I barely remembered writing those words, yet somehow they had become true. Neither of us spoke for a long time. We simply sat together, surrounded by the ghosts of 2 young people who had believed love could conquer anything. In some ways, it had. It had survived distance, silence, marriage, children, grief, time itself. It had simply taken nearly half a century to find its way home. "There is something else," Evelyn whispered. She reached into the bottom of the box. Beneath the letters lay a tiny velvet pouch. She untied the ribbon. A delicate silver ring slipped into her palm. It wasn't expensive, just a simple band with a tiny blue sapphire. I stared at it, speechless. My goodness. I remember this. I saved for months. I worked every Saturday at Mr. Carter's gas station. I wanted to ask you after graduation. She smiled through tears. I know. You knew? She nodded. My mother told me. She found the ring hidden in your jacket after graduation. I laughed softly. I was so nervous. You never had the chance. No. I never did. She placed the ring gently in my hand. I've carried it for 47 years. I looked at her. Why? Because I always hoped you'd be the one to give it to me. My eyes filled with tears. Evelyn. She reached across the table and held my hand. We can't get back the years. We can't change what happened. But we can decide what happens next. I looked down at the little silver ring, then back into the eyes of the woman I'd first loved when we were teenagers. My voice barely rose above a whisper. Would it be foolish to ask now? She smiled. No, Thomas. It would be 47 years late, and exactly on time. She slipped the little ring onto her finger. It still fit, perfectly. Neither of us noticed the tears running down our faces. Outside, the last drops of yesterday's rain fell from the trees. Inside, two old hearts quietly began the happiest chapter of their lives. But before we could tell our families, there was one person we both felt we needed to visit. The place where our story had truly begun. The old oak tree behind Lincoln High School. 2 days later, we drove to Lincoln High School. The old brick building looked smaller than I remembered, or perhaps we had simply grown older. The football field was still there. The gymnasium had been renovated. The classrooms had new windows. But one thing hadn't changed. The oak tree. It still stood at the edge of the field, stretching its enormous branches toward the sky. For nearly 50 years, it had quietly watched generations of students fall in love, dream about the future, and promise forever. As I parked the truck, neither of us spoke. We simply stared at it. Evelyn smiled. It survived. So did we. I reached for her hand. Slowly, we walked across the grass together. The autumn leaves crunched beneath our feet. A cool breeze carried the scent of earth and fallen leaves. For a moment, the years disappeared. I wasn't 68 anymore. I was 17, walking beside the girl who had once made my heart race every time she smiled. When we reached the tree, Evelyn gently touched its rough bark. I used to think about this place. So did I. I wondered if anyone ever noticed our initials. I laughed. They probably thought 2 teenagers carved them. We were 2 teenagers, she smiled. I searched the trunk carefully. Time had covered much of the old carving. The bark had grown thicker. Nature had tried to erase our story. Then, near the center of the trunk, I found them, barely visible. T plus E. I froze. They're still here. Evelyn stepped closer. Her fingers brushed across the faded letters. Tears filled her eyes. I thought they'd be gone. So did I. She leaned her forehead gently against the tree. I spent years trying to forget you. I looked at her. Did it work? She smiled without turning around. Not for a single day. I laughed softly. I failed too. We sat on the old wooden bench beneath the tree. It wasn't the original bench. The old one had long since been replaced, but it stood in exactly the same place. A group of teenagers crossed the football field, laughing loudly. One young boy reached for a girl's hand. She smiled shyly. Evelyn watched them disappear into the distance. Do you think they know how lucky they are? They probably think they have forever. We thought that too. Silence settled between us. Not a painful silence, a peaceful one. Finally, Evelyn asked, "If you could go back, would you change anything?" I thought for a long moment. I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. And I wouldn't erase my life. She looked surprised. You wouldn't? I slowly shook my head. No. I loved Martha. We built a family. We raised 2 wonderful children. I became a grandfather. I wouldn't trade those memories. She smiled gently. I'm glad. What about you? She looked toward the school. I loved David. He gave me a beautiful life. We had 3 daughters, 7 grandchildren. He made me laugh every day. She paused. But, she smiled at me. I do wish we could have had this without losing 47 years. I squeezed her hand. So do I. Just then we heard footsteps behind us. An elderly groundskeeper pushed a small utility cart toward the football field. He smiled politely. Beautiful day. It is, I answered. He glanced at the oak tree. You folks remembering old times? Evelyn laughed. Something like that. The man leaned on his rake. You know, I've worked here almost 30 years. I've seen hundreds of former students come back. They always look for this tree. Why do you think that is? Evelyn asked. The old man smiled. Because people forget that buildings change. Roads change. Cities change. But love, if it's real, it always knows where home is. Neither of us said a word. The groundskeeper tipped his cap and slowly walked away. His simple words stayed with us. Love always knows where home is. As the afternoon sun filtered through the branches, Evelyn reached into her purse. She unfolded one of my old letters. The paper had become fragile with age. She smiled. I've read this one hundreds of times. What does it say? Instead of answering, she handed it to me. I recognized my own 17-year-old handwriting. Near the bottom was a sentence I had completely forgotten. If life ever gives us another chance, I promise I won't waste a single day. I smiled sadly. I guess 17-year-old me was wiser than I realized. Evelyn looked into my eyes. Then let's keep his promise. What do you mean? No more waiting. No more wondering. No more living in yesterday. We've already lost enough time. I nodded. You're right. So, she smiled playfully. What are we doing tomorrow? I laughed. I don't know. What do people our age do on a first date? She burst into laughter. Our first date? Technically, our second first date. I stood and offered her my hand. Miss Evelyn Harper, would you do me the honor of going to dinner with me tomorrow night? She pretended to think for a moment, then slipped her hand into mine. I'd love to, Thomas. As we walked back toward the truck, our fingers remained intertwined. Two teenagers trapped inside older bodies, still laughing, still dreaming, still falling in love. Neither of us realized that our families were about to receive news they never expected. News that would bring tears, laughter, and one unforgettable surprise. The following Sunday, Evelyn invited me to her house for dinner. "I think it's time," she said over the phone. "Time for what?" "For our children to meet." I laughed nervously. "That sounds more frightening than asking you to marry me." She laughed. "It probably is." I stood outside her front door carrying a bouquet of white lilies, not roses. Evelyn had once told me, back in high school, that lilies reminded her of peace. I'd never forgotten. She opened the door before I could knock. "You remembered." "I remember everything." Her cheeks turned pink. Even at 68, she still blushed. Some things never grow old. The house slowly filled with people. Her oldest daughter, Susan, her youngest daughter, Emily, her son-in-law, Michael. Grandchildren running through the hallway, laughter, voices, the smell of roast chicken drifting from the kitchen. It reminded me of Sundays long ago. Soon, my own family arrived. My daughter, Sarah, my son, Daniel, their spouses, 5 grandchildren. The youngest, little Noah, clung shyly to my leg. I hadn't seen my house this full since Martha was alive. As everyone greeted one another, I noticed curious glances. Who was this woman? Why was Grandpa smiling so much? Why did Grandma Evelyn look at Grandpa Tom as if she'd known him forever? The questions were written on every face. After dinner, Evelyn gently tapped her glass. The room grew quiet. She looked at me, then back at our families. "There is something Thomas and I would like to tell all of you." Daniel smiled. "Dad, you're making us nervous." Everyone laughed. Evelyn reached for my hand. I felt my heart pounding exactly as it had at 17. I cleared my throat. "Most of you know that your mother—" I glanced toward Martha's photograph sitting quietly on my bookshelf. "Gave me 40 wonderful years." Sarah nodded, wiping away a tear.
And David gave Evelyn a beautiful life. Her daughters smiled.
"We will always honor them. They will always be part of who we are." The room remained silent. But I looked at Evelyn. Long before any of that, we were each other's first love. A few gasps echoed around the room. Susan blinked. "Wait, you two dated?" Evelyn smiled. "In high school." Daniel laughed in disbelief. "No way." "For how long?" "Almost 3 years." Emily looked completely stunned. "You never told us." "We didn't think it mattered anymore." "It did," Evelyn whispered. "We just didn't know it yet." For nearly an hour, we told them everything. The letters, the move to Ohio, the hidden wooden box, the lost years, the rainy afternoon at the grocery store. No one interrupted. Some smiled, others quietly cried. When I finished, little Noah climbed onto my lap. "Grandpa?" "Yes, buddy." "Did you really wait 47 years?" I laughed softly. "I guess I did." He thought about it for a second. "That's a really long time." "It is." He wrapped his little arms around my neck. "I'm glad you found her." The room fell completely silent. Sometimes, children say what adults spend a lifetime trying to express. Daniel stood first. He walked over to Evelyn. Without saying a word, he hugged her. A long, warm hug. When he stepped back, his eyes were wet. My mom loved my dad very much. I know. And my dad loved her. I know. He smiled. If Mom were here, I think she'd tell both of you to stop wasting time. Tears rolled down Evelyn's cheeks. I think she would. Across the room, Susan laughed through her tears. My dad would say exactly the same thing. The tension disappeared. The room filled with laughter, stories, old photographs, questions. For the first time, our two families no longer felt like strangers. They felt connected, as if life had quietly woven them together years before any of us realized it. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Evelyn and I sat on the back porch. The sky was clear. Hundreds of stars shimmered overhead. A cool breeze rustled the trees. I was so afraid, she admitted. So was I. What if they didn't understand? They did. She leaned her head gently against my shoulder. You know, I've spent years praying for one more miracle. I kissed the top of her head. Maybe this is it. She smiled. No, this isn't the miracle. What is? You are. I looked at her. She reached into her pocket and gently held the little silver ring I'd given her days earlier. I've waited 47 years to wear this, she smiled, and I'm not planning on taking it off. I took her hand. Evelyn, there is one more thing I'd like to ask.
She looked at me with that same shy smile I'd fallen in love with as a teenager. What is it? I took a slow breath. We've already lost almost half a century. I don't want to lose another single day. She nodded. Neither of us realized that our answer to that conversation would lead to a wedding unlike anyone in our town had ever seen. A wedding that would remind every person there that love has no expiration date. A week later, Evelyn called me just after breakfast. Thomas? Yes? I've been thinking. That usually means you're about to change my life. She laughed. I already did. You certainly did. There was a brief silence before she spoke again. I don't want a big wedding. Neither do I. I don't need a ballroom. I don't either. I don't need expensive flowers. You'll always be the most beautiful thing there. She chuckled. You still know how to flirt. I've had 47 years to practice. She laughed so hard she had to pull the phone away from her ear. When she returned, her voice had grown softer. I just want something simple. Something real. So do I. Where? There was a pause. Then she answered with one sentence. Under the oak tree. The very place where we had carved our initials as teenagers. The place where we had promised forever. The place where life had separated us. And the place where life had finally brought us back together. There couldn't be a better place, I whispered. Our families insisted on helping. Susan volunteered to decorate. Daniel offered to arrange chairs. Emily baked the wedding cake herself. Sarah found an old jazz trio that played songs from the 1960s. Even the grandchildren wanted jobs. Noah proudly announced, I'll carry Grandpa's ring. Everyone laughed. You mean Grandma's ring, Daniel corrected him. No, Noah said confidently. Grandpa waited a long time for it too. The adults exchanged emotional smiles. Sometimes children understood love better than anyone else. Word spread quickly through our small town. The local newspaper heard about the couple who had reunited after 47 years. A young reporter called. Mr. Miller, would you mind if we wrote a story about your wedding? I looked at Evelyn. She shrugged. If it gives someone hope,
let's do it. The article appeared 2 days later with the headline, "First Love Finds Its Way Home After 47 Years." People we had never met began sending letters. Some shared stories of losing loved ones. Others wrote that they had finally decided to reconnect with someone they had been too afraid to call. One woman, 83 years old, wrote, "Your story reminded me that my life isn't over yet." Evelyn folded the letter carefully. If one person finds hope because of us, then every tear we've cried has been worth it. The wedding day arrived on a bright Saturday afternoon. The sky was perfectly blue. Ironically, not a single cloud could be seen. "I thought it might rain," I joked. Evelyn smiled. "I think the rain already did its job." She was right. Without that rainy afternoon outside the grocery store, none of this would have happened. The old oak tree stood proudly behind us. Rows of white chairs filled with children, grandchildren, neighbors, and old classmates. Some people had driven hundreds of miles just to witness the ceremony, not because it was extravagant, but because it reminded them that hope can survive almost anything. As the music began, everyone stood. I turned, and there she was, Evelyn, walking slowly toward me. She wore a simple ivory dress, no glitter, no long train, no expensive jewelry, just the little silver ring I'd given her almost 50 years too late, and the smile I had carried in my heart for nearly half a century. For a moment, everything around me disappeared. The guests, the music, the trees. All I could see was the 17-year-old girl who had once walked toward me at our senior prom. Only now, she had silver hair, gentle wrinkles, and eyes that had become even more beautiful with time. When she reached me, she whispered, "You look nervous." "I've been waiting 47 years. I don't want to mess this up." She laughed quietly. "You won't." The minister smiled warmly. "We often hear that love is patient." He looked at both of us. "I've never met a couple who proved it more." Soft laughter echoed through the crowd. Then he asked, "Thomas, do you take Evelyn?"
I never let him finish.
"With all my heart." Everyone laughed. The minister grinned. "I'll count that as a yes." When it was Evelyn's turn, tears filled her eyes. "I thought I'd lost this chance forever." She looked at me. "But love found its way back." "Yes, I do." The applause began before the ceremony had even ended. Noah proudly handed us the rings. The same small silver ring remained on Evelyn's finger. For me, our children had chosen a simple gold band. As I slipped it onto her hand, I quietly whispered, "This time, I'm not letting you go." She squeezed my hand. "You never really did." After the ceremony, everyone gathered beneath the oak tree for photographs. Someone asked us to stand beside the old carving. The photographer smiled. "Can you both look at each other?" We did. He lowered his camera for a second. "I photographed hundreds of weddings, but I've never seen two people look at each other like that." Neither had we, because what he captured wasn't the excitement of young love. It was something quieter, something deeper, a love that had survived grief, distance, time, and nearly half a century of silence. That evening, as the sun began to set, Evelyn leaned her head against my shoulder. "Thomas?" "Yes." "Do you have any regrets?" I looked around. Our children laughing together, grandchildren playing beneath the oak tree, friends dancing. The woman I had loved at 17, holding my hand at 68. I smiled. "Only one." "What is it?" "I wish it hadn't taken us 47 years. She nodded. "So do I."
Then she smiled. But maybe we needed every one of those years to become the people who could truly appreciate today. I kissed her forehead. I think you're right. Neither of us knew that our story was about to touch thousands of hearts far beyond our little town, because one photograph from that wedding would soon spread across the country, changing not only our lives, but the lives of countless others. The Monday after our wedding, life returned to what most people would call normal, or at least it tried to. I watered the flowers. Evelyn baked blueberry muffins. We argued, playfully, about whether the living room needed another lamp. She insisted it did. I insisted it didn't. She bought it anyway. I waited 47 years, she said with a mischievous smile. I'm not arguing about a lamp. I laughed. You've become very persuasive. No, she replied. I've become too old to waste time. That sentence stayed with me. Too old to waste time. Maybe that was the greatest gift of growing older. You stopped worrying about the little things and started protecting the moments that truly mattered.
3 days after the wedding, Daniel called. Dad, have you looked at your phone today? No. Why? You should. I picked it up from the kitchen counter. There were dozens of missed calls, text messages, voicemails, emails. Friends I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, former coworkers, even people from high school. I frowned. What happened? Daniel laughed. Dad, you're famous. I nearly dropped the phone. Don't joke with me. I'm serious. He sent me a link. The local newspaper had posted our wedding photograph online. The picture showed Evelyn and me standing beneath the old oak tree. We weren't looking at the camera. We were looking at each other. Neither of us had noticed the photographer taking that picture. Maybe that's why it felt so real. The caption read, "After 47 years apart, they finally said I do." Within 3 days, more than 2 million people had seen it. Thousands of comments poured in from across the country. Some were only a few words. This made me believe in love again. Others were longer. People shared stories they had never told anyone. A woman in Texas wrote about losing her husband after 53 years of marriage. A man in Oregon admitted he still thought about the girl he had loved in high school. A widow from Florida wrote, "I've spent 10 years believing my life was over. Today, for the first time, I feel hope." Evelyn sat quietly beside me, reading every message. At one point she whispered, "They're not crying because of us." I looked at her. They're crying because they see themselves. She was right. Our story wasn't special because it belonged to us. It was special because it reminded people of someone they had loved, someone they had lost, someone they still missed. A month later, we received an invitation from the director of Rosewood Senior Living. It was the largest retirement community in our county. The letter read, "Many of our residents have been deeply moved by your story. We would be honored if you would visit and simply spend an afternoon with them." Evelyn folded the letter carefully. We should go. I was thinking the same thing. The following Saturday, we walked into a room filled with nearly 80 residents. Some sat in wheelchairs, others held canes. Some smiled as we entered, others simply watched quietly. The director introduced us. "We'd like you to meet Thomas and Evelyn." Before she could continue, one elderly gentleman raised his hand. "I already know who they are." Everyone laughed. The director smiled. "I suppose many of you do." We didn't give a speech. We didn't stand behind a podium. Instead, we pulled 2 chairs to the front of the room and simply told our story. The rainy afternoon, the grocery store, the lost letters, the little silver ring, the oak tree. Every now and then, someone in the audience would wipe away a tear,
Others smiled at memories only they could see. When we finished, the room remained silent for several seconds. Then an 86-year-old woman slowly stood. Her hands trembled as she held onto her walker. "My name is Margaret," she said. "My husband died 12 years ago." She smiled through tears. "I thought my heart had retired with him." The room grew still. "But today, you reminded me that hearts don't retire. They just keep waiting for another reason to beat." Not a single person in the room remained dry-eyed. Neither did I. Neither did Evelyn. After the gathering ended, people lined up to speak with us. One man showed us a faded black-and-white photograph of his fiancée, who had died before they could marry. Another woman whispered, "I'm going to call my sister tonight. We haven't spoken in 18 years. A gentleman in a navy cap smiled and said, "I've been too afraid to ask a lady here to dinner." He laughed nervously. "I think I'll ask tomorrow." Evelyn squeezed his hand. "I hope she says yes." "So do I," he replied. As we walked back to the parking lot, Evelyn slipped her arm through mine. We didn't just find each other. No. I think we found a purpose. I nodded. Maybe that's why life brought us back together now. Not when we were 17, not when we were 30, not even when we were 50, but exactly when two ordinary people could remind others that love, hope, and second chances don't belong only to the young.
They belong to anyone whose heart is still willing to open. As we reached the truck, a light drizzle began to fall. I looked up at the gray sky and smiled. Evelyn laughed. "What?"
"It seems the rain still lacks following us." She leaned against my shoulder.
"Maybe it's just making sure we never lose each other again." For a long moment we stood there together, listening to the gentle rhythm of the rain. This time, neither of us feared it, because we had learned something that took nearly half a century to understand. Sometimes, the storm isn't the end of your story. Sometimes, it's where your happiest chapter begins. Autumn slowly gave way to winter. Then winter quietly surrendered to spring. For the first time in many years, neither of us counted the days. We simply lived them. Every Tuesday morning we had breakfast at the little cafe where we'd first talked after meeting again. The waitress, Claire, always smiled when we walked in. "Your usual table?" She didn't have to ask anymore. It had become ours. One morning she brought our coffee and laughed. "You two have the easiest order in the whole restaurant." Evelyn smiled. After 70 years, life teaches you what's important. Claire looked at us curiously. "And what's that?" Evelyn reached across the table and took my hand. "Who you're sharing your coffee with." We began traveling. Nothing extravagant. Small towns, country roads, quiet lakes, old bookstores. We weren't trying to see the world. We were simply enjoying the part of it we still had. One afternoon we drove to the Blue Ridge Parkway. The mountains stretched endlessly beneath a golden sunset. We sat on a wooden bench overlooking the valley. "I used to dream about this," Evelyn whispered. "What?" "Growing old with someone who never made me pretend to be anyone else." I smiled. "You don't have to pretend with me." "I know." She rested her head against my shoulder. "And that's why this feels like home." One evening, while sorting through old family photographs, my granddaughter Lily sat beside us. She was 16, the same age Evelyn had been when I first fell in love with her. Lily picked up our wedding photograph. "I've been wondering something." "What is it?" I asked. She looked from me to Evelyn. "Were you ever angry?" "About what?"
About losing 47 years. The room grew quiet. Evelyn looked at me before answering. I used to be. For a very long time. And now? She smiled. If I spend today grieving yesterday, I'll lose today too. Lily nodded slowly. I never thought about it like that. I touched her shoulder. Life always gives you two choices. You can count what was taken from you, or you can treasure what is still in your hands. She hugged both of us before quietly leaving the room. That summer, our story reached television. A national morning show invited us to share our journey. The host smiled as the cameras began rolling. People across America have fallen in love with your story. I laughed. I think they're in love with hope. The audience applauded. The host turned to Evelyn. What advice would you give someone who's convinced they're too old to begin again? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at me, then back at the audience. If your heart is still beating, God isn't finished writing your story. The entire studio fell silent. Then everyone stood and applauded, not for us, for the truth hidden inside those simple words. Months later, on another rainy afternoon, Evelyn and I returned to the grocery store where we'd met again. Almost without thinking, we stood beneath the same little awning. Rain danced across the parking lot. People hurried to their cars, just as they had that day. I smiled. Funny, isn't it? What is? If I had decided I didn't need bread that afternoon. She laughed. If I'd brought an umbrella, we might never have met again. She slipped her fingers between mine. I don't believe that anymore. You don't? She gently shook her head. No. I think God had already decided we'd meet. The rain was just his way of slowing us down. I looked into her eyes. After everything we'd lived through, I believed she was right. As we walked toward the truck beneath one umbrella, I realized something. 47 years earlier, I thought our story had ended. It hadn't. It had only paused. Life had taken us through joy and heartbreak, marriage and loss, children and grandchildren, only to bring us back to the place where love had first begun. Sometimes people ask me if I wish I could go back and change the past. I always give them the same answer. No. Because if I changed even one chapter, I might never have become the man who could truly appreciate the woman walking beside me today. And every time the rain begins to fall, I still reach for her hand. She still smiles. And together, we remember that beautiful October afternoon when two ordinary people discovered something extraordinary. True love doesn't always arrive on time. Sometimes, it simply waits patiently until two hearts are finally ready to find each other again.